The Canadian government has taken its first concrete measures to protest the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Ottawa is imposing sanctions on a group of Saudi nationals allegedly linked to the killing in Turkey, freezing their assets and barring them from entering this country. The move follows similar action by Washington and was announced by Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland in Buenos Aires earlier today. She's there along with the Prime Minister representing Canadian interests at the G20 summit.
I think that we've already seen in many different areas that what Canada says is noticed in the world, and Canada's voice has real weight. Canada is rightly seen as a country that stands for the rule of law, a country which is careful and thoughtful, a country that does not act rashly, a country that takes actions based on a thorough investigation, a thorough factual basis, and at the end of the day, a country that is prepared to stand up for human rights. And another important element here is to stand up for journalists and for freedom of expression. So I absolutely believe that Canada's action will have an impact, will be noticed around the world, and certainly I've already been in touch even today with some of our allies who wanted information about what we were doing.
Our Katie Simpson is part of the CBC News team in the Argentinian capital. She tells us the punitive measures announced by Ottawa come as the Saudi Crown Prince is mixing with other world leaders at the summit.
It certainly looks like Canada is trying to make some waves here at the G20 summit. As Saudi Arabia's crown prince mingles with other world leaders, Canada has announced it will impose sanctions on 17 Saudi nationals it believes are linked to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, who is in Buenos Aires for the gathering, did not, however, announce any decision about whether Canada will stop selling light armored vehicles to the kingdom. The announcement also makes no reference to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and whether Canada thinks he is responsible for the murder.
We believe that in naming people and in saying, in the view of the government of Canada, that someone is responsible for something so serious and so odious, it's very important to gather all the facts. It's very important to act and to speak only on the basis of real certainty.
Freeland will spend much of the rest of her day talking with her Mexican and American counterparts about a completely different issue, and that, of course, is the new USMCA trade deal. Canada still will not confirm any sort of signing event will happen 100% tomorrow, only that things are tracking toward that goal. The Prime Minister won't be involved so much in that today, as he's spending much of today here in Argentina speaking at several events about empowering women in the workplace. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Buenos Aires.
So for reaction to Minister Freeland's announcement, let's bring in Canada's former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, David Chatterson. He is just outside Kelowna, British Columbia. So, Mr. Chatterson, are these sanctions meaningful?
Well, I think they're a step in the right direction. I would say that once the U.S. Issued very similar sanctions, it came as no surprise that Canada would follow in those steps. I must say I'm pretty pleased that we haven't, at least yet, canceled our arms contract, because I don't think that would have been the right thing to do.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that would not have been the right thing to do?
Well, the largest arms suppliers to Saudi Arabia have not canceled any of their contracts. Whatever we might sell would be replaced by someone else. I think these sanctions put us in good stead with our allies. Although at the same time, I think at the same time we're buying into a Saudi narrative here. The Saudi foreign minister some weeks ago announced 17 Saudi individuals were responsible for this rogue action in Istanbul, after previously having said that they knew nothing about it. And fundamentally, these 17 individuals that we have sanctioned are the fall guys to provide distance between Mohammed bin Salman and the murder of Khashoggi.
It's interesting that you say that Canada shouldn't cancel the LAV contract. It's because someone else or another country will just fill that gap. That is the argument that Donald Trump made, right? I mean, it is similar to his argument that they should continue selling arms to Saudi Arabia, but isn't it a moral obligation for a country to say we're not going to sell arms to a country like Saudi Arabia that behaves in the way that Saudi Arabia behaves?
Well, I think the question is, what are we actually responding to? Are we responding to the killing of a journalist, which was absolutely horrific, but there are many other countries that are arresting, detaining, and killing journalists and critics of their regime. China, Russia, the Philippines, Turkey. I'm not sure why we would stop at Saudi Arabia if we want to be consistent. And secondly, I think the fundamental issue here is the issue of silencing critics and freedom of the press. And if those are the issues that we're most concerned about, I think we could respond in a much more positive way to support freedom of the press worldwide rather than cancel an arms agreement.
It's interesting that the 17 names on the Canadian list do not include Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. What should we read into that?
Well, we wouldn't. That name was not going to be on there. I have not heard of any hard evidence that would implicate the Crown Prince in directing this murder. That said, I think almost all informed observers, including the CIA, would say that this could not have happened without his involvement, if not his actual direction. But there is no hard evidence.
How would you say Canada's response compares to the United States, the European Union, other countries?
Well, it's very similar to the United States, and we have, of course, much less at stake in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East than does the United States. I think we are certainly ahead of the European Union, which, to my understanding, has still not got anything together other than a travel ban by Germany and a cessation of, not terribly large sales of armaments to Saudi Arabia by Germany. Britain and France are the ones that really matter. They have significant economic and security interests in Saudi Arabia and the region, and so far I've heard nothing from them.
And so do you feel, though, that Canada's response has been more measured since Chrystia Freeland, the Foreign Affairs Minister, sent out that tweet months and months ago condemning the human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia and leading to a souring of relations between Canada and Saudi Arabia?
Oh, absolutely. I think this announcement of sanctions, particularly the timing at the time of the G20, was measured, was thoughtful, and was professional.
And what do you think Saudi Arabia's response to it will be?
Well, I don't think they're waiting to see what we say. The hard truth is we're not a major player there. They will be dissatisfied. It hurts their brand. It hurts their reputation. I mean, they certainly
reacted. They certainly reacted when Freeland tweeted months ago.
Yeah, that was more a measure or a means to provide a message to other countries and domestically. I think what they're looking at very closely right now is the U.S. Senate, which for the first time in memory, they have had a bipartisan agreement to examine the U.S. role in supporting Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis the war in Yemen. I think that's of much greater concern than our sanctions of 17 individuals identified by, effectively, the Crown Prince.
Do you feel, though, that Saudi Arabia is maybe led by the United States, in a way being treated with kid gloves? I don't think they're led by the United States. I think they might be, at the margin, emboldened somewhat by them, but they're going to do what they think they need to do, and we have a very young, impetuous Crown Prince that has no, seemingly, good counsel or fetters on his behavior. So Is that not
kind of what we get.
concerning? Is that not concerning?
Oh, it is concerning, but I mean, it's also concerned in many other countries. I mean, we're very fortunate to have democracy here. Many countries do not. So I'm not sure how we directly affect the behavior of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I think what we can most usefully do is to support critics, objective critics, and a free press worldwide. That way you can shine a bit of light on what's happening in Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi people themselves have a better understanding of what their leaders are doing.
Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
David Chatterson served as Canada's ambassador to Saudi Arabia earlier this decade.